Hi, it's Pastor Steve, and we're continuing our journey cover to cover. Today we're looking at January 3rd, and our scripture today is chapter 7 of Genesis through chapter 11. And we're dealing with the whole flood narrative and the details of that. It is a narrative story, and worth mentioning a principle when you read narrative stories. And from time to time, we're going to give some instruction on how to read different genres of the scripture. When you're reading a narrative, it does not mean go and do likewise. It means the camera is rolling, and these are the things that happened. Sometimes we have a voice from God or a voice from the prophet which gives us specific instruction as to whether this was blessed of God or judged of God. But in all narrative sections, you have to make that reasoned decision. Is this just telling the story with the good, the bad, the ugly? Or are there some principles here that I can apply because they came from the Lord? In this case, what comes from the Lord clearly is His choice to destroy the world and begin afresh through Noah. Now, just an interesting thing, I don't know if you've heard of this, but people have actually rebuilt the ark, and you can go to Williamstown, Kentucky, and actually tour the ark as these people have speculated based on how big they believe it is. One of the measurements in Scripture, they say, is a cubit. How long is a cubit? Well, a cubit, if you have your hand, is from the point of your tip of your finger to the end of your elbow. And so when you hear how big the ark was, that is your explanation of how you come up with these measurements. Now, how did the animals all come from all over the world? Well, if you can believe Genesis 1, verse 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, we can believe that God can make arrive for Noah all that is necessary. And there's all kinds of humor and jokes that I've seen on Facebook about, why did Noah have so many cats on board? Is because Mrs. Noah wanted all the cats. Or, why certain animals were extinct is because one animal ate the other. And you look at these things and you can make lots of humor. But the bottom line is who was on the ark was what God wanted to be there. A key passage, though, that I want to point out is in chapter 8, verse 21, in which God is saying, I know that the disposition of humanity is towards evil. So even as they come off the ark, God is acknowledging the brokenness of humanity. The Apostle Paul refers to this in Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fallen short of God's glory. That is the world we have, and we live in a broken and fouled up world. And so when we see terrorism, when we see evil portrayed time and time again, these things don't catch God by surprise. He knows the disposition of humanity. In a little while, we'll get to the book of Jeremiah. And in Jeremiah, the prophet will say, the heart is desperately wicked. Who can know it? And so that is a foundational verse for, again, understanding what is to come. And when you have a verse like that, often something bad happens soon after. And what happens soon after that is bizarre. Right after we hear about the rainbow, God's promise that He's never going to destroy the world by flood again. We come then to the latter part in chapter 9, where the heading in our Bible says Noah's sons. And we meet three of them, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. But here's what happens. And it's a bizarre passage, and you're going to leave your head scratching. Ham sees his father naked while Noah's on a bender. Drunk, and he drank his new wine, and he's wasted and naked. Ham sees his father naked, while the other two sons, Shem and Japheth, they walk in backwards and cover the father's nakedness as a way of preserving his modesty. Noah wakes up, and he doesn't just curse Ham, he actually curses Ham's child. Cursed be Canaan. And you're saying, I'm sorry, why is it such a big deal that Ham saw Noah naked? And why would he curse his grandchild instead of Ham? It doesn't make a lot of sense. So there's a phrase that I've used. The highest point in Israel was often called Dan. The lowest point is often called Bathsheba. Those are two towns. And so scholars will sometimes say, from Dan to Beersheba, referring to the soup to nuts. You might hear me say that from time to time. When you look at commentaries on this passage, you will see a wide variety of explanations. A number of years ago, I heard a novel explanation of this passage, which I think has credibility, and it's going to catch you off guard when you hear it. But the phrase seeing someone's nakedness in Hebrew is an idiom. An idiom is something, for example, somebody asks their child, how was the test you took today? And the child might respond, it was a piece of cake. Well, what does that mean? If you were telling somebody who has English as a second language, they would have no clue what that means. But if you grew up in American culture, you know it means it was an easy test. Well, this phrase, seeing somebody's nakedness, when you look at the book of Leviticus, shows up all the time as an idiom for having inappropriate sexual relations. Now, Jewish scholars think maybe Ham had sexual relations with his father while he was passed out. That's a possibility, and understandable why he would curse Ham and be very angry, except here's the problem. He cursed his grandchild. Here is another possibility for this passage. That Ham, while daddy was wasted, went into his mother's tent and had relations with her. She conceived, and that child was Ham's child. Ham was trying to take the patriarchy away from Noah and usurp that authority. That would make sense of saying what's going on in terms of the idiom meaning seeing somebody's nakedness. Now, at the end of the day, we don't fully know an explanation of this passage. Here are possibilities. It is what it is. Ham saw his father's nakedness. He shouldn't have done that. Shame on him. It just doesn't make sense culturally. Is it that he had relations with his father? That would fit the idiom, and that would make some sense, and that is what many Jewish commentators will argue. But that is the problem of why does Noah curse his grandchild? Well, the third option, the one I kind of lean to now, is that Ham had relations with his mother. He went into her tent. In Hebrew, the tent is mentioned in the feminine tense, which gives me a plausible explanation of why Noah curses Ham's son. In the end, we don't know the answer for this perfectly, but I wanted to deal with that because that's probably, of the passage we looked at, one of the toughest things to understand. I hope you're digging into this. One time I heard somebody explain when they went through Genesis for the first time, it was like, who's sleeping with who? And yes, that does come through. As we're looking at Adam's family, we're a motley crew. We certainly are. God bless you. Have a great day.